Hey, what's up everybody? This is Lindsay Lerner, and you're listening to The Cost of the Status Quo. More people than ever are questioning why they do what they do and forging their own path. And on this show, I sit down with these entrepreneurs, trailblazers, creatives, and overall awesome beings to discuss the ideas, the opportunities, and the overall tips and tricks they're using so that the rest of us can do the same. This is The Cost of the Status Quo. Hey everyone, welcome to The Cost of the Status Quo. We're here with Big Lux, known today as a hip-hop artist, violinist, lyricist, composer, educator, activist, and a film director for his own music videos. Prior to his career as a full-time artist, Big Lux, formerly known as Kevin Lowther, was a West Point grad and Iraq War veteran. He left the Army in 2017 after 13 years of service. We will be diving into all that and more in this episode. Listeners, thank you so much for listening, and it would mean the world to me if you subscribed, rated, and reviewed this. And now, welcome Lux.
Pistol, get him. Rifle, get him. Machine guns, get him. It's a war of attrition. Snipers, hit him. RPGs, hit him. AKs, hit him.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be dope.
Heck yeah, absolutely. Before we dive all the way back, I've got to know, how did you get the name Big Lux?
Yeah, so it's a story. We have to go all the way out to Korea, probably about 2014. I was stationed out there in the Army, and being out there definitely changed the course of my life because it was my first time really being a part of a real, robust arts scene, because the expat community over in Korea is just amazing. And just to give a little context, Koreans are so crazy about education. After they go to like 8 hours of regular school, they'll go to like 3 hours of what they call a hagwon, which is just like a private school where they learn English. They need teachers for all these hagwons, so they draw from all these English-speaking countries. So there's tons of, Americans, British, South Africans, Irish, New Zealanders, Australians. And so this mix of expats, and they're all young and usually just kind of just out of college. And so, everybody just want to be out in the street all the time and doing things. And so I tell people that Seoul is the way that they think LA is, like, just because, all those expats are out there, they're out there doing all the things that you would expect people to be doing in LA. They're like voice acting and getting commercial work and working in movies and writing and performing music and forming bands and all this stuff. And it was just like, I had never experienced anything like this. Koreans needed foreigners to fill roles in their arts and TV and film. You could get into major motion pictures having zero experience, like it was just this wild environment. And, so in the middle of all of that, I was trying to figure out what to do with my violin, and I was playing in the street and just busking and getting my chops together and meeting people. Eventually, I started to kind of get gigs, and I was like, okay, I need an artist name I can figure out. And so I chose Lux Luther. My last name's Lothar. People butcher it all the time. I was like, I might as well be like Luther anyway. All right, so we can do that. And Lux was an English word that Koreans use to mean deluxe, but they dropped the E off of it, so it's just Lux. And it was on all these buildings and billboards and everything. And so it was just, one time a promoter brought me in for a show, and he just like shortened it to Big Lux, and that stuck. And so I was like, all right, I'll run with it.
Now that we're all on the same page in terms of where your artist name came from, what was it like growing up? Where was that? When was that? And when did the violin first enter your life?
Yeah, so I grew up in Westerly, Rhode Island. I don't know if I want to answer the when question, but definitely did the Y2K party. So I'm definitely not Generation X, but yeah. So my parents were actually both musicians. They met in Newark, New Jersey, at an arts high school, and my dad, his sister, so my aunt, she played violin. And like my dad tells a story about how he went to go out and visit her when she was at college, and there was this event that they were at where they saw like a whole bunch of like really young kids playing incredibly complicated things on the violin. And my dad was like, how is that possible? What is this? And somebody told him it was the Suzuki method. And so it stuck in his head that I think that he was going to have me and my brother learn instruments and try to learn the Suzuki method because he was just like kind of amazed by the results.
So, how old were you when your dad first handed you this violin?
So he didn't. That's what I really like about the story. Like, so he, after experiencing all of that, he was just like, let me just keep on exposing these kids to string instruments and piano and different instruments that are taught in the Suzuki method because it's more than just violin. And then like around like 7 or 8 years old or something like that, then he gave me a choice and was like, what instrument you want to play? And I guess I told him violin. So I think he probably just incepted the idea in my head, did a great job at it.
How did you go from being full-time in the military to then within a few years doing what you're doing now?
So when did I leave? I left active duty in 2017, and then I went to University of Miami for a couple of years to get my master's degree. So I took my talents to South Beach, and I was trying to figure out how to make a life down there. And I tried to do too much. I stayed in the Army Reserves, so I was still doing missions for the Army Reserves. I was going to school full time. I found a job with a real estate developer down there, and so I was doing that full time as well. And then I was trying to keep up with my music, and I was getting gigs because everything in Miami, I only had maybe like 2 or 3 public shows in Miami. Like the vast majority of my work there was like organizations who would find me and they're like, oh, I need you for this gala, or I need you for this fundraiser, or I need you for this thing. Like music in Miami is just like not public. It's like for private institutions and nonprofits and rich people who are trying to hire you. So it was like I was making money. I was like figuring out, what I needed for equipment. I was getting in the industry, but I wasn't like really, I knew it wasn't in a way that was going to be sustainable there. I knew I was probably going to have to leave Miami to make it work. But there was a month that I was made more in music than I was in my day job doing real estate. And so I was like, you know what? If I'm ever going to try this, the time is now.
Wow. And so were there any expectations at any point, whether it was when you first entered into the military, West Point, or throughout your service in the military up to present day? Were there a certain set of expectations that either you had for yourself or maybe others had for you that you followed or didn't follow?
Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, I guess I'll start with my own expectations. Like, I think what I thought was that, I was like a kind of creative but scattered kid. Like, I wanted to maximize my abilities, but I was like, I felt like I needed the discipline that I was going to get in the Army. I felt like it was just a piece of me. Like I knew I was having trouble with, I don't know, some like basic communication skills, and I just wasn't quite connecting with the world around me. It was like I was kind of like floating through it, and so I was like, I need something to kind of ground me to reality, so I can figure all these things out. And that was kind of my expectation for going into the military, and I think it was mostly met. I grew up a lot. There were highs and lows, and the West Point, it was almost all lows. But yeah, so that was my expectation. And then I think the Army is 100%, like being in the military is, they don't just give you expectations. They outline them and they number them numerically and they put them in manuals, and they just like, here is our book of expectations for you, please. We will expect you to read this from front to back and memorize them. That's what it is to be a member of an organization like that. And then all of the culture things that they expect you to know about the military and how to act in it, and that you're not supposed to get too close to your subordinates, and how you act around your superiors and calling them ma'am and sir. And, like the whole military, I think, is just forming an expectation of how you have to be, how you have to act, how you have to look. We have Army Regulation 670-1, which is an entire book about, your your hairstyle and your uniform look.
What about your current hairstyle? Does that meet that
That is
specification?
not. It is totally not in AR 670-1.
What was it like, Little Lux, back in the day? You're in Westerly, Rhode Island, of all places. And so do you think that need and or craving for some sort of communication skills and structure, was that because of the environment that you grew up in? Or was that more just who you were as a person and those are the things that you needed at the time?
It's a little bit of both. So you asked me about the kind of where I grew up. I didn't really elaborate on that very much, but Westerly, Rhode Island, when I was growing up here, it was a town that was like 95% white, and probably like 65% of that 95 was like Italian. You were in or you were out, and it's so interesting, as like a young Black person, like I didn't see myself in the community in anywhere, in any way, shape, or form. And when you have that kind of structure, like it's almost like I didn't see like a white and Black thing. Like people were like curious because like I was the first Black person that a lot of my classmates met. But like,
In their whole life.
so yeah, so I had to answer a lot of questions. But for me, it wasn't really a thing. It was just like it was more like an Italian versus like not Italian thing. Always being an outsider and not really understanding or connecting with like my own culture when I was growing up, except for when I would go to like see extended family in Jersey. I think it probably played a role, but I mean, I'll be honest too. I was just a weird kid, so like I think that's probably the bigger part of it. I was just like a big violin playing weirdo.
I love it. I love it. And so you leave Miami, you leave real estate, you decide to take this jump to get into music full time. You come back to Rhode Island. And what was that process like? Was that calculated? Was it figuring out a budget? Is it, are we crashing on people's couches? Are we maintaining some sort of lifestyle? Are we exclusively playing cover gigs? And what did that look like? Because obviously, military wise, like we've discussed, it's been literally by the book. This is what you do, when you do it, how you do it, and why. And then now you have this freedom to do anything and everything. How did you decide what was next?
I spent a lot of time trying to visualize what my life would look like after I left my day job. And I realized that I just couldn't. I had no idea what I was going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And that actually really, really excited me because I was just, I had been grinding for so long, and I was just like, I want to be able to decide everything. I am just going to just lean into that and just figure it out as I go. I had a couple things going for me when I left. One was that I had one of my friends, Tom, was a marketing professional, and he was trying to get into managing musicians. And so he was on the team very early and was working for below rate, thank God, because I could not afford to pay him that much.
Shout out to Tom.
Shout out to Tom, Scribe Digital, still grinding hard for me. Yeah, and he's got me some amazing gigs. And so I knew I had kind of him in my back pocket to go out and look for the casino stuff, the big corporate stuff, to negotiate with some venues. And so that was a huge part of the transition. I probably wouldn't have been able to do without him. The other thing I knew was I had a great producer that was a really good friend of mine. His name is Phil Boudreau. Grew up in Barrington, Rhode Island. We met in the Rhode Island Philharmonic Youth Orchestra. Played violin there too. And we were both so similar. Like we both got into jazz. He ended up picking up trumpet and I played trombone, and we made the All-State Jazz Band together. And he ended up going to Berkeley and then out to LA. And he is one of the powerhouse producers, like young producers out there. Like there's no way if we weren't friends, that he would be working with me right now, but I know he would. So I
That's
went,
amazing.
yeah, yeah, and he's so dope. And he got nominated for a Grammy this year with Black Violin. He produced their album Take the Stairs. And so we worked together on my first EP. And so I was like, I know I want to have some original music out there by the time I hit the ground in Rhode Island. So, we tracked it and everything there. And then, I wrote it I wrote most of like the lyrics and the lead parts while I was in Rhode Island, and I recorded it in Florida like a couple of months later. But I knew I wanted to have some original music. I wanted to have somebody who's helping me get gigs. I was living with my parents, which was actually pretty cool because, I've been overseas in the military so long, we missed out on a lot of time together. So it actually worked out really well coming back home. And I was not making very much money at all. Oh, and by the way, I had heard from a good friend, Katie Ahern, that there was this thing called the level exchange. So I made the pilgrimage up to Pawtucket, Rhode Island to meet somebody called Lindsay Lerner to see if she could help accelerate my career. And so that's how we met when I just came back that summer, and I was like looking for ways to get my music out there. And you did me a couple of like really huge solids, like by getting me a TED Talk in Providence, and it's really helped raise my profile and give me this great asset that really helped launch my career as well. So thank you so much for that. That was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, man. Hey, that's what we're here for. I believe in you, believe in the work, and it's really it's motivating and I think inspiring, and that's really why I wanted to share your story with listeners of Cost of the Status Quo, is because it truly is like I feel like there is no status quo in your brain. The visual that I've chatted about with a lot of people around the status quo is that when we're born, there's lovely people around us, for most of us that are fortunate enough to have a support system, that basically flip on this switch that is the status quo. And they say, yeah, you should do this, you should do that. And I think that the people who intentionally recognize there's something a little off, and it's like, and then they spend basically the rest of their lives working really, really hard to switch off that switch so it doesn't exist, and then they continue to do the things that they want to do. And I feel like for you, you're just like, no, this is what I'm going to do, and this is this is how I'm going to do it. I respect the hell out of that. You also have a career in some regards as an activist, as an educator. And then another thing that we have to dive in a bit to is your new entree into the political sphere.
Oh man, it's a soul story how we got there from here. So I really wish I had documented this process better, because it's hopefully going to be a great story someday. But activism was always a part of my music. So the 2019, when I left my job and I went to go record with Phil Boudreau, one of the songs that we did was a song called Red March. And it was a song that was inspired by the late, great John Lewis, who worked tirelessly for voter rights in Congress and is a titan of the civil rights era. And he wrote a book that became a graphic novel about his experiences marching in the civil rights, and that 3-part series called March. And so that really inspired me to write some, activist lyrics in this song about marching for what we believe in. This during the Trump administration, and there was a lot of craziness happening in the government. So yeah, so that was always a part of it. And then the summer of 2020 comes around. I basically am unemployed because I perform for a living. Coronavirus just destroyed my livelihood like a lot of other people's. And so I had a lot of free time on my hands and really, really leaned into social activism and seeing all this energy in Providence and New York and meeting people and then throwing my own events, and then realizing that there was somehow this protest that sprang up in Westerly, Rhode Island. This like one of the whitest communities in Rhode Island had this protest going, and I was like, I drove by it and I saw it and I was like, I can't believe what I'm seeing right now. And so I was like, I need to find out who's organized, like, what is this? And so I stopped by, started to make friends with some of the folks there. And we decided to band together to make a coalition called the Anti-Racism Coalition, so that we would be organized. We would be able to, we'd have a newsletter, get our word out. We'd be able to do advocacy at the local level, and advocate for policies at the town government or the school committee that we thought we needed, and be able to also like talk to town leaders. Forming that group, we didn't know it at the time, but that basically was going to be our political base. And, the next step to advocacy was realizing that instead of having to convince people of the things that we needed, why don't we just get elected and do those things ourselves?
Yes. that. So as an avid activist, when you're trying to educate people on race and racism, are you able to integrate that into your shows? Or do you use the violin not only as the instrument that it is, but an instrument to level the playing field with the people that you're interacting with?
I think there's a few different ways that I use the violin. One is to get into rooms that I normally would not get in. Sometimes it's just being there and like being even if I'm the only Black person in there, that forces people to consider their actions like and in ways that they wouldn't if it was an all white space. So there's that. I do have lyrics in my songs that tell how I feel about the world, about how my family has fared in this system, and about how we need to like stand up for what we believe in. So that is a thing as well.
We got a march.
Most people at my shows are on the team. I feel like a lot of it would be preaching to the choir. So I'm not really too explicit about it in my shows, especially for shows where people there are like, really to see me. If you bought a ticket, then you kind of know what it is. You know the deal. Like you look at my Instagram, you'll be like, oh yeah, you you performed in front of like a 40-foot Black Lives Matter projected screen. Like, like you're about that life. Okay. So
right, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of the work is going to happen away from the music, and I have to convince people of my character and competence. And so I think the political arena is it's definitely a more appropriate place for me to say like, okay, all right, you know who I am as a musician, but you have to take some of the things that I'm saying a little bit more seriously now that I am in front of you and I'm making this economic, moral case for equity and diversity in our towns.
Definitely. And so what does your typical day look like now? How are you balancing these cover gigs, original gigs, educating, being an activist, and now this most recent entry into the political sphere?
Right now, I'm not going to lie. I am, for the last 2 summers, it's basically been like, let's see if we can do everything. And like the least important things are going to fall by the wayside. It's just, like, because you don't know what you're capable of and you don't know where it's going to go. So it's hard to prioritize. So, I mean, the cover gigs are the day job. That's what gets me, that's what keeps the light on. So 50% of that is like venues and 50% of that is private gigs like weddings and in corporate things. And so, just doing the admin, doing all the communication on that stuff, that's probably the largest percentage of my time. And then trying to sell tickets and promote the artist gigs, the original stuff, that's probably like the next block. So I probably play like, 2 or 3 shows a month that are either with my band or are going to be mostly originals. I have a show in Newport. Like this weekend is the Newport Jazz Festival, and I'm doing an after party at a speakeasy called Newport Dive Bar. They're like, we're going to sell $50 tickets and it's not even going to be a problem. And I was like, all right, I've never sold a $50 ticket to anything, but like, let's do it. And yeah, they're all basically sold out right now. I'm just like, oh, by the way, I don't know if this is going to be like a cover gig or if I can do my thing. I'm probably going to mix it up. We'll see how it goes. So yeah, so we have those two kinds of gigs, and then probably like the political thing is kind of third right now, and that for me involves. I'm currently on the town planning board for Westerly, so that's like biweekly meetings of looking at blueprints and approving development, and and I'm also trying to rally my political base to show up to these meetings and to support affordable housing because they all the neighbors will show up and they'll be like, no, we don't want this project, and nobody will speak for the project. So we're trying to change that narrative within the town and show that there's support for these projects, and then campaigning and then organizing for the anti-racism coalition. That stuff happens there. So yeah, my days are all over the place.
And for this position that you're running for town council, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, you said you're the first Black man to be running for this position?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the first to run.
But when you win, you will be the first person to hold the position.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that. Like, there's no records of this. That's not something they keep track of at the city hall. So I can ask the clerk, and she'll be like, "We don't know." But they have the pictures of every town council back to like 1920 on the walls there, and I was like going through them, and I was like, I don't really have like Ancestry Day and DNA or like 23andMe skills like that, but I think I'm pretty sure I know a lot of white people when I see them. So
You
yeah.
sure do. Sure do. Okay. All right. Well, for anyone who is listening who is in Westerly, which there may be a few of you, be sure to reach out to Big Lux to have your political conversations and discuss your hopes and dreams for Westerly and what that could look like.
And vote.
And exactly. And vote. Always. Always, always, always. What is the worst piece of advice that you've ever gotten? And then to end it on a high note, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten?
The worst piece of advice that I've ever gotten was from the Army that that basically they sold us like a bill of goods as officers, and they said, the corporate world is going to love you, especially if you do this job of company command and you command soldiers and you can show that you ran an organization and were successful at it. They will reward you with like $100,000 job and everything is going to be amazing. And yeah, that was totally not my experience. Like most of the companies I talked to, even the ones that were kind of designed for veterans and soldiers, that kind of experience was not something that they really cared about at all, like at all. They're trying to figure out if you're a good culture fit. They're trying to figure out if there's somebody that they want to like have a beer with after work. They're trying to figure out how slick you are during your interview. That kind of work experience. What you commanded like 200 soldiers, like Koreans and Americans up in the demilitarized zone in Korea? Was that North Korea or South Korea? Oh, like, how does that translate to what we're trying to do? And you're like, bro, I did really hard things. I like led people. I motivated them. I did a ton of maintenance. I created training plans. I trained my subordinates. I did like, did all these things. And they just like, I don't know. I can't help you if you don't think this is going to be something that works out. So I'm glad that I had the experience doing company command anyway. I think I got a lot out of it. But I think I did it for some of the wrong reasons. The best piece of advice I got from my dad, and he basically just told me that, hey, like, people are gonna eliminate themselves, so why would you do that? Like, if you think that an opportunity is too big for you, do it anyway, because there's going to be a lot of people who think that it is too big for them. There are not a lot of people who are not going to be able to meet the moment. A lot of people who didn't put it in their calendars and forget to show up. And so if you do all those things, you have a chance, and you're standing there. And that's, how I live my life. I don't think there's any experiences or any challenge that's kind of too big. I'm going to show up for it. It's one of the reasons why I'm running for office, just show up for it and make it happen. So yeah, shout out to Pops.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing your best and your worst advice. I think there's obviously lessons to be taken away from both. And like you said, shout out to your pops. And again, just to reiterate, for those of you who may be listening from Westerly, get out and vote. And other than that, definitely be sure to check out all of Big Lux music on every imaginable platform. So thanks again, Kevin, for being here. Super appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor, and it's a good time, and you inspire me. So this is fantastic. I'm going to leave today with my cup full.
Thank you for listening to The Cost of the Status Quo and learning the wisdom, stories, and ideas that will have you feeling inspired and ready to take on the world. If you've enjoyed this, please remember to share, rate, and review. It means the world to me and the team putting it all together. If you're looking for more information, you can find us at costofthestatusquo.com or on Instagram at costofthestatusquo. If you've got any questions or curiosity about me, you can find me at lindsaylerner.com. That's LINDSEYLERNER.com or on Instagram at Lindsay Lerner. Thanks again for listening. Hope you have an awesome day.